Everybody has to deal with being different. Everyone's unique. Everyone has to get along or not. And everyone has to figure out whether they're going to try to tell. And these words literally came out of my mouth. My mission is to create bridges. The minute I stopped worrying about it and caring that, this may not work out, I was much happier and my playing improved and my whole outlook on life improved and my quality of life improved. That's the human story. And it's a fantastic, inclusive place. And they have always given me an opportunity to be exactly who I am and to bring the kind of music that I want to them. I don't worry about it anymore. And I don't worry about the things that I am ending. I'm not worried about them being replaced by something better because they have been.
Well, basically, from the place of happiness, you went to a constant flow. I'm Matt Mack and this is Bloody Mavericks. Today we have a person who loves learning and sharing his gifts for popular music and its history with others. Performer of retro jazz and pop who loves to do it with like-minded people. The virtuoso of keyboard. Today we are going into some artistic Maverick stuff and wait and see. Shalom, Mashum Mech. Jordan David Klapman, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Lovely to be here.
Awesome. Jordan, so you've got some mixed background from similar regions that I do. We have a lot in common in that sense. You have some Polish, some Russian, you've got Canadian, obviously, and Jewish, right? Jewish roots.
That's right.
So it's quite a mix.
Yes, it is.
And before we're gonna dive into what's coming from where, which root and which part of the family is which lineage, let's focus for a second what we have here today. We've got some proper Jewish food. I would say we've got some pita, we've got some labne, which is kind of something in between yogurt and cream, I would say, right?
Between yogurt and ricotta.
Ricotta, yeah, right. Exactly. We've got some proper hummus. It wouldn't be anything without it. We've got pickled beans and cucumbers as well. In how would you say about the cucumbers? What's the
brined?
Brine. Okay, right. Yeah.
Dill? Are they dill?
Yes.
Okay, dill brined.
And obviously we've got nice modern way of Jewish cuisine, which is special type of sandwiches. Like I had some amazing bagels in New York from a Jewish place, and this is kind of a Toronto version of it, I would say, which is a special type of bun too, which is not the typical. But we've got type of aubergine inside there with parmesan and some
beautiful
tomatoes. So please dig in.
Oh, dig in.
Start.
Wow. My kind of interview, Matt.
Awesome. Great to hear. That's the reaction I want to have for sure. We'll start. Go ahead. Watch out. They're really hot though.
Okay. Beautiful. We used to get, this one's falling apart.
No worries.
Okay. We used to call this an onion pretzel.
Onion pretzel?
Onion pretzel.
Okay.
We used to get them at Kensington Market. We used to come in from Kitchener-Waterloo, where my family lived before I moved to Toronto full-time.
Okay.
To come to school. And we would get these at the market. And it's an onion bun.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
And some pita as well.
All right, I'm going to start with this.
Yeah, wow. For sure. Yeah, and tell me what you think, how far it is. So you said you've been having this before on the Kensington Market. Any special place out there, or is it?
There was one particular bakery that doesn't exist anymore. at the corner of Baldwin and Nassau.
Okay.
And it actually belonged to a lady who became her family owned it, and it became she became basically our adopted godmother.
Oh, that's nice.
She used to always bring stuff back for the kids when she went to Florida. And she helped me find my first house with my wife, and basically became our agent, and is the reason that we now have a lovely house in Toronto, because she was a wonderful real estate agent. Her name was Pearl Godfrey, and she was fantastic, as well as being a very, very loving, dear friend.
Yeah, makes sense.
So her family owned this incredible bakery.
And the bakery is no longer...
It's no longer there, no.
Okay.
No. These look great. These are very reminiscent.
Good to hear.
Batea von, as they say. Oh, yeah. This, I guess, is the vegetarian equivalent of a veal parmigiana.
Yeah, I think so.
Beautiful.
And there's so much to Jewish cuisine that you can eat different things every day. Almost.
Absolutely. It's like klezmer music. It's like the ultimate world cuisine, because wherever Jews have lived, they've absorbed and adapted and adopted different foods the way they did with music. That's what I really like about it. It's not one flavor fits all.
That's right. There are so many, right?
Very much. Oh, this is great.
And even if you think about now, since what 30 years, I think there's Israeli culture, right? But before that, it was just Jewish, right? And at the end of the day, if you said it is hard to say that you are like when you are pointing out where are you from, like Polish, Russian, Canadian, because if you add Jewish is not only ethnicity, right?
Right.
There's so much more coming to it.
It's cultural, it's racial, it's religious, it's a lot of different things.
That's right.
And when people say to me, are you Jewish? And I say, well, I'm culturally Jewish. I don't happen to be particularly religious, but I certainly grew up with familiar with the religious aspects of it. I consider myself a Jewish humanist more than anything. I'm an inclusive Jewish person, and that includes all of the different cultural aspects.
So how would you define the inclusive Jewish person, and how you approach including those aspects?
Well, for me, I look at the world through a Jewish perspective. That's sort of my moral code, and that's the history of my family on both sides. But I'm not parochial about it. Although I was given a thorough grounding in all of the religious parts of it, and had a bar mitzvah. And when I met my wife, she was very concerned because she's not Jewish. And she said, what are our children going to be? And I said, they're going to be both. They're going to have the best of both worlds. It's not a zero-sum game here. It's going to be better than just one thing. Nothing's excluded. Everything's included. And that's how I see the world, viewed through a humanist Jewish lens.
That's definitely a different approach, I would say, because most of the time, if you meet a Jewish person, they are either super conservative.
Can be, yes.
they can be super liberal.
Yes.
And not practicing.
Mm-hmm.
But still, at the end of the day, everyone with the Jewish roots, they do appreciate where they're coming from.
Yes.
I have yet to meet a person who doesn't. And for me, myself, that was a process, and I'm still, according to the books, I'm a half Jew, which doesn't really matter in terms of humanistic approach, I think, right? And even for me was a journey of discovery and kind of understanding where it's coming from and learning it on my own, because there was no guidance. It was suppression of those roots for longest time, and my biological father never been there. So that was something really, really interesting. I'm trying to understand how, from your perspective, and how you approached it. Even you said you've been growing with the religion, right? Raised in the ways of Abraham, probably, right?
Yes.
You would say.
Yes.
And the ways the religion should be conducted. Was it kind of strict, or was it more? How does it look like?
Right. Okay. Well, growing up, we moved around a lot, so I got different flavors depending on where we moved. My dad was always moving us around the country. He got itchy feet often. So I was born in Winnipeg, and when I was not even 5, he moved us out to Calgary. He took a job there, and after a couple of years after that, he moved us to London, Ontario. We were there for about a year and a half. Then we moved back to Calgary. I mean, and then we moved to Waterloo, and then to Kitchener, Ontario. So every place we lived, I had slightly different Jewish influences. When we were in Calgary the first time, I actually went to a Jewish school, a Jewish day school. But it was secular. But by the same token, I had to do sort of remedial work so that I could learn Hebrew, and I could be up to par to the kids who had been there right from the beginning. So I was always kind of making up and always learning new things. But the one thing that was consistent was that we were always attending services, but never really part of the Jewish community that we were with for very long. And I didn't make a lot of friends until I was pulled away from them. And that was very formative for me as a human being, because it shaped who I became and my view of the world and what friends are and what being Jewish is. And
that happened, it
happened every time we moved. It happened about 5 times before I was a teenager.
Wow.
And it really shaped who I was. When we lived in Kitchener, that was before I came to Toronto, met my wife, and got married here. We were part of a synagogue that was conservative, but the rabbi was Orthodox. So there was this terrible push and pull between whether the women and the men should sit together, and whether the Torah should be paraded to the people at the very back who were sitting in mixed combinations, who some of the clergy didn't approve of. I mean, it was divisive. And what I didn't like about my religious upbringing was that there were times when it really separated us and it made us feel like pariahs. There were times growing up when I was even younger when we were pulled out of class during the reciting of the Lord's Prayer, if you can believe it, which ironically Jesus recited and learned. It's a Hebrew prayer. It's from the Old Testament. But they pulled us because other Jewish kids that my parents were friends with and that I was ostensibly friends with were pulled from the class, and they wanted us to act in consort with them, which is ridiculous. But here we were standing in the hallway, feeling completely ostracized. No alternative activities were made, no accommodations were made for us. And I just felt different and cut off, and I didn't know why they were treating us differently. I felt persecuted, although I never would have expressed that as a kid. I just knew that we were different and we were being treated differently. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be part of a club that's going to exclude to this degree.
Yeah.
And if that's what being Jewish is, then that's not the kind of Jew I want to be. And as a result, my family we were never really religious. It was never important. We always felt a little bit like imposters in the synagogue. It didn't feel right. We went to day school. I learned Hebrew. I had a bar mitzvah. But we never were really part of any of the Jewish communities that we were living in. So when I came to Toronto, I realized it's the cultural aspects. It's the food. It's the language. It's the music. It's the shared history. It's the history of Broadway. It's the history of Tin Pan Alley. It's the history of Hollywood. That's the cultural heritage that I'm most proud about. That happens to be Jewish. I'm proud that I'm connected to Albert Einstein. But again, he was a musician and he was secular and he happened to be brilliant and he happened to be Jewish. That's what I was proud of, and that's been consistent my whole life. So I didn't have any trouble marrying someone who wasn't Jewish. I had no problem at all.
It's interesting how the life unveils while you kind of process the experiences that you have and the experiences that you are exposed to by others. And at the end of the day, there always is a time where you are in front of the decision that you need to make, right? And it seems like it was a breakthrough for you. Do you have a specific moment when that happened, or was it?
It's been just a gradual, consistent pattern in my life. And I guess when I started living on my own and I started finding my own community, I realized that it was the humanist Jewish community that I related to the most, which is why I got involved in klezmer music, which was very much. Some of the musicians were Jewish, some of them were completely secular, some of them weren't Jewish. It didn't really matter, but it had a feeling and a spirit to it that I could relate to because I understood the sound of Jewish music because I grew up in the synagogue and I grew up with cantors and I grew up listening to the music that was created in the pop world that was based on a lot of the things that were historically Jewish.
So give me some examples of music that have been based on.
Well,
if you popular music.
Sure, right? If you look at the music of Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, the Marx Brothers were wonderful musicians. All of the music that was in the great Hollywood movies, the music of Harold Arlen, the music of Irving Berlin, the music of Al Jolson, all their fathers were cantors. And they've been so absolutely influential on the direction of popular entertainment in North America, North America, that's the sound of American popular music. That and the African American combination, there was a very interesting back and forth between the Jewish and the black music. That's the sound of American pop. And people like Louis Armstrong literally grew up as orphans. He wasn't an orphan, but he basically was in an orphanage. He was raised by a Jewish family and wore a mezuzah around his neck that they gave him, and they bought him his first trumpet. And he grew up loving Jewish food, Jewish music, Jewish culture. He always had a Jewish manager because he trusted Jewish people. So they're just all incredible intersections. It's all about the intersectionality, I think, of the Jewish with the larger world that I've always just loved. I love it. It's profound.
It is, and if you look at it, the way that those intersectionalities play a role in building the history and anything through the history, and it shows a different picture of a Jewish culture and Jewish people, right? Because there are a lot of, like, about every culture, there are a lot of preconceived notions who Jews are, how they behave, what they like or don't like, and all that, right?
It's just prejudice.
It is. It is. And
not just, it's serious, but it is prejudice.
Mm. I'm curious to say, because there's a lot of going on in the world where there's to the point, I want to hear your point on, I know it's political, but I want to ask you about your view on the country that carries your name. And the Israel, right, community, because back in the day that was one country, right?
That's right.
That was one people.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerusalem is the best example of it, where they can live in a peaceful community, right? Relatively, yeah.
Yes, it is possible. It is possible. My father got a chance to take some trips to Jordan when he was volunteering in Israel about 25 years ago, and he loved it. I got a chance to visit Egypt. That was as close as I got to sort of finding out what the other half of the Semitic world was like. Because I haven't actually been there, I can really only go by what my dad said, but he really found it not all that different. I mean, clearly it's not a Jewish place, but culturally, he could tell that it's an Abrahamic place. It's definitely a Semitic place. It's definitely a place that he could relate to more than he could relate to other places around the world that he's been to. So I would probably feel the same. Having said that, I don't think it's necessarily easy for these countries to get along because of politics. It has nothing to do with the humanity of it. It's strictly politicians that have divided and conquered. All world religions, I think, are aiming for the same thing. They're like stereo systems. It doesn't really matter what components get combined. They're all creating beautiful music. And you can do it in a number of different ways. But when people's egos and prejudices start to come into it, then you get politics, and then you get artificial divisions that I don't think really exist. And that's when you have conflict. But the other thing about conflict is the only reason wars start is because two sides have something in common.
That's so true. And each party fights for their right to it, right?
It's everybody's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Let's round back to the roots. I want to hear how it looks like on your family, who's bringing what to the table, and
okay. Let's start with my father's family, because that's partly the Polish root. My father's father was born in Ploch, and he had a memory of a biplane crashing into his village after being shot down during the First World War, and he came to Canada on a ship just prior to the revolution, so prior to 1917, the Russian Revolution. And he settled in Winnipeg with brothers and half-brothers, and he was involved. He was a tailor, and his other brothers were quite accomplished entrepreneurs and became quite successful creating garments, coats, and they got some big contracts to do things for the government, and did very, very well. My father's mother came from quite an educated Russian family, although the borders kind of moved around. But it was a Russian family. They were landed immigrants. They had land, but they lost everything during the revolution or just prior to it, and literally came to Canada with chests of worthless rubles or whatever the money was then, and had to start again. And she was quite bitter because of that, and never really felt that her life allowed her to accomplish what it could have. She had more. She and her sisters all had quite a bit of education for someone of that generation, and they really didn't. They really didn't get an opportunity to accomplish everything. They were quite cultured, and they kind of married. In their minds, my grandmother married downscale.
Oh,
she didn't. She married a tailor. He was a lovely guy and very sweet, but she was bitter. And that affected my father's life and his older brother as well. And he didn't get really a lot of support from them, emotional support. On my mother's side, her father's father was actually born in either the States or Canada. They went back quite a bit to the 1880s. They were landed immigrants. They were given 40 acres, and they were part of a settlement in Saskatchewan called the Hershey Settlement. Their last name was Hirschberg. And in those days, the Canada-U.S. border was very porous. So my mother's father's father was often in and out of the Dakotas and Manitoba, and his wife was also, I believe, Canadian born. So we went, for a Jewish family on that side of the family, we went back about 4 generations, which is fairly far in Canadian history. My father's family was more typical. They were here just prior to the tightening of immigration in the 1920s, which also happened in the States. But so it's Polish and 1/4 Polish and then about 2/3 Russian on both sides. And blonde and blue-eyed on my mother's side, which is really interesting.
Is there anything from the upbringing that comes to mind in a way, besides moving from school to school, besides not really fitting in, on the Jewish side of a cultural upbringing? Were there any specific things that you think today you are still carrying over, and that kind of things that made you successful in your life?
Well, I think it was important for me to be aware of my roots, and my education certainly did that. We were only in Calgary at this parochial school for about a year and a bit before we were pulled out again and dislocated and brought back east. But I did, for the first time in my life, spend all of my time with other Jewish kids and got an opportunity to see what it was like to learn in a Jewish community. That was probably helpful, and the teacher that I had really got me, and I really got her, and we actually stayed friends for years and years after that. I think my Jewish cultural education gave me an appreciation for the history. It wasn't taught in a particularly inspiring way, unfortunately, but it did make me aware of things that weren't being taught in public school, which is where I spent the majority of my learning as a kid. So that was good. To this day, I still don't know what the Torah portion that I read on my bar mitzvah, really what it was about in terms of detail. But I do know that part of it was talking about we have met the enemy and he is us. Basically that it was about historically, it was talking about the Jewish people not having to worry about external destruction more than assimilation and internal strife, which really hit home for me, because I realized, yes, this is not a perfect culture. There isn't a perfect culture, and there have been lots of mistakes as well as good things that have happened. And it's all about understanding who you are and being proud of it, but not to a fault, not to become a chauvinist about it, and not to try to shove it down people's throats. And I feel more affinity to Jewish humanists than I do to people who are Orthodox. I don't really have much in common with them. I don't feel culturally that much in common with them. I can relate to our common roots in terms of the religion and the language, but in terms of the worldview, I'm much more inclusive than that.
And do you think part of your inclusivity is coming from you being so close to music?
It's part of it, but also I learned it from my parents. My mother's family was remarkably liberal. My father's family was a little bit more conservative, but my mother's family, they had intermarriage the generation before hers. And her grandfather, actually, 2 generations before her, was a card-carrying communist. And her sister's father-in-law and their common father were all involved in the Winnipeg General Strike. They were very, very much communists. And they questioned authority very much. They were not, they didn't buy into this whole assimilation thing. They knew what had gone on in the old country, and they knew that they had to really fight for their rights if it was going to be better in North America. And they were very active in that general strike as a result.
Wow. I'm always so amazed when you think about history. It loves to repeat itself. The
same problems need to be dealt with by every generation. I've heard it explained that it doesn't necessarily repeat verbatim.
Yeah.
But it mirrors. The mirrors are constant.
That's right.
You're constantly getting a reflection of a reflection, but it's the same human story, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has to deal with being different. Everyone's unique. Everyone has to get along or not. And everyone has to figure out whether they're going to try to tell other people how to be or not, or whether they're going to accept them for who they are in the same way they want to be accepted. That's the human story.
Plus, I would add the fight for if you don't feel part of something, then whether you're gonna accept it and just go with the flow, or you're gonna be fighting for yourself.
Right.
Are there, like, your experience, your background is a beautiful mix of your culture, but also your own personal experiences and challenges, I believe, and your approach to, as you say, being Jewish humanist, approach to world, to other cultures, other people, and the variety that the world brings, and this country brings it to the highest levels so far that I've seen. And I just want to know how that whole point of view, how does that affect your story?
It is my story, and it has affected how I live my life and how I work and how I interface with the world. It has literally affected what I teach, how I teach, my mission, really. And I had lunch with someone earlier today, and these words literally came out of my mouth. My mission is to create bridges. I'm very active and a member of the music committee at my wife's church, where she has sung for the last almost 35 years. And it's a fantastic, inclusive place. And they have always given me an opportunity to be exactly who I am and to bring the kind of music that I want to them. And I've brought them Jewish music from time to time, but there are times when I'm quite happy to do music that isn't Jewish. It's very secular or it's Christian. The fact is, I accept who they are, and they accept who I am, and I'm very comfortable with that. I don't have to stay in a cultural ghetto to feel that I'm still being who I am.
Where do you think it's coming from, that self-awareness or confidence?
It's just a function of having done enough of this stuff with enough different people in enough different situations to know what feels right. And I know who my supporters are. I know who the musicians are that I'm comfortable with and can count on. And I chose music not because it was easy. This was not my first career. My first career was actually visual art, and I could always draw. I couldn't always play the piano or compose or be a music director, but I could always draw. That was easy. The only thing that made me change was that I realized music will allow me to reach people on a different, more emotional, direct level. And it will allow me to combine and collaborate music with other people in real time. And reach people in a different way than I could through the visual world.
It seems like you were about the connection and the infusion of emotion into your audience.
Always. The best music just does that because it's coming from a non-ego place. And that took a few years for me to get to the point where I wasn't playing music from an ego place. I've never been a particularly egotistical person, but I do like to lead, especially when I'm confident that what I will do will have a good result. And I'm a benevolent leader, but I do like to lead. But I also knew that it was possible to create art with others, for others, that bridged everybody's. I like to be a good manager. I like to bring the best out of people because it brings the best out of me.
Is it any special way that you go about that?
It's such a natural process for me now. I put together programs for people that either ask me for them or for whom I have done other work and trust me to offer them something that they'll enjoy and that their audience will enjoy. And I just basically go with my intuition on what works, and I use the people, if I can, the other people to play it with me, and I basically just trust my gut. Because I know it's coming from a good place. If I'm coming from a good place, the music is almost incidental, and I'm in a good place, and I have been for quite a while. And I'm really glad that I stayed with music for 40 years, because it sure as heck wasn't this easy to figure out exactly how I wanted to do it when I started. But it became a natural process in the same way that picking up a pencil and drawing was a natural process from the first day I did it.
So what was the moment that you decided to kind of transition from one to another?
Well, I was working at a studio in downtown Toronto, which I discovered one day. And I walked in. It just seemed like an interesting place. And I befriended the man who was running the studio. And it was kind of an independent little place with drawing boards. And he basically let me... I didn't even have to rent space from him. He let me kind of be... I wasn't even a member of the staff. I was just sort of part of the group of people who were in and out. He just liked it to be a cultural, creative place. And sometimes he'd give me work. Sometimes I would learn things from him and help him do things. I became a sign painter. I was an illustrator. I learned how to And these were the days before computers, so I learned how to do typefaces, and I was literally getting things printed out and cutting them up and pasting them on boards. This is pre-cut and paste computer stuff.
Yeah.
And one day, and I did this for several years, not making much money, just being creative and living the downtown life, renting. In those days, it was relatively easy to live inexpensively in downtown Toronto. And one day, on my way to work, I passed a travel agency, which had a big poster in the window that said Jazz Cruise on the SS Norway cruise ship, Norwegian Cruise Lines. And I looked at all the names of all the people that were playing on that cruise, that either that year or the year before, or whatever. And I thought, wow, it sure would be fun. Because I was still playing piano sort of for fun in the odd gig. I'd been playing professionally since I was in university, but now I decided maybe this is more practical being an artist. But I thought, no, I'd like to get away this winter. So why don't I contact these people? And I got an opportunity to sub for a few weeks. And I thought, yeah, I can maybe juggle both. I can maybe do both. And that was kind of a pivotal moment when I realized it's not an either or. I can do all the creative things that I want. And it'd be nice to get away for the winter. It'd be nice to play in the Caribbean. And that's what I did. So that was a pivotal moment. And another pivotal moment was when I was on that cruise. I got an opportunity to, actually, no, I did a number of them. Whenever things were slow in the commercial art business, I would get away and I'd go on a cruise. And the third time I did it, it was a terrible, terrible cruise, but it gave me an opportunity to get to a really deluxe island. It was St. Bart's, which is one of the 5-star locations in the world. Very, very expensive. It's where all the rock stars go. And I got a gig at a brand new hotel that hadn't opened up yet. And that was another pivotal point in my life when I decided, yeah, I probably could do commercial art and I probably could do music and kind of switch hit. And my wife came down and we worked together, and she sang with me because she was bilingual and it was a French island. And I got her engagement ring.
Wow.
And came back and we started a family. And this was many years after we'd met because I didn't want to settle down. But there have been pivotal points like that where it just became clear that I have a few gifts and it makes sense to share them as much as I can. Right now I'm putting all of my effort into music simply because I'm enjoying it so much and it's really making a difference, especially after the pandemic when everybody was absolutely starving for musical comfort.
Yeah. Now
I'm providing that for people who just love it, and I get so much back from it. I don't need to do anything visual right now, but it's always in the back. It's always in the back. It's always another feather in my quiver.
There's so much to acknowledging and also knowing your skills and your skill set, and especially that you enjoy different things. And funny thing is, you sometimes, if from my own experience, you start enjoying things more when they are away and you put them on the side.
Absence makes the heart grow fond.
Yeah, that's true.
Often. It used to drive people crazy that they couldn't pigeonhole me. But I see that as a strength, not as because I'm not a dilettante. I have made a real study of both of these careers, and I feel quite confident of what I'm capable of. I know my limitations, but I also know what I'm good at. So if I can offer that to the world, I do. If the world wants it, that's great. But I don't feel as though I have to compromise who I am or what I do just because it's not commercial at that moment. That's not what life's about for me.
So I'm curious, what made you look at life from this perspective?
I've always been philosophical. I've been in high school I was kind of treated as a philosopher. one of my teachers said I was just a natural born fatalist. He said you just plow ahead because you figure out things are going to work out the way they're supposed to work out. And it's true. It's true. And when I stopped fighting that, I became a much happier person.
Was it like started to open up a flow of things when you...
Yeah. I've been in the flow for a while now. The pandemic gave me an opportunity to really reassess, because I had a lot of friends who were gobsmacked by the whole thing. They had no idea what they were going to do now that their main source of income and how they defined who they were and their place in the world had been taken away from them. Because without an audience, a musician becomes a broadcaster to vacuum land. And I didn't want to do that. I ended up becoming quite good at doing virtual performances and then virtual teaching. And I taught myself how to make iMovies and how to do slideshows online. And heaven knows I got good at Zoom. But a lot of my friends didn't. They just didn't have audiences anymore and nowhere to gig. And they were miserable. Some of them just gave up. Some of them left town. Some of them just got really bitter. And I thought, no, I have a family to support and I have lots to offer, and I better get my acting gear and just learn some new skills. And I did. And I think it was a practical thing that's done me good, because now now I've got these extra things that I can do. Fortunately, I can perform a lot in person again now and teach in person again now, which is a whole other thing.
It seems like you found found a way, first of all, to persevere through difficulty of the pandemic, and then kind of build on top of that and kind of tweak it, and also walk into the open world again with full strength and full capacity.
I actually got better as a musician because I was playing all the time, writing music, woodshedding, basically, just working at it. And as I became more confident and grounded that I had made the right decision and not given up, it just became easier for me to get in touch with the creative stuff. And the minute I stopped worrying about it and caring that, this may not work out, I was much happier, and my playing improved, and my whole outlook on life improved, and my quality of life improved.
So basically, from the place of happiness, you went to a constant flow.
Pretty much. And even on a bad day, I know I can do the gig. I was telling you earlier, I had quite a setback yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, or even for me a few years ago, it would have been just devastating. I got a spontaneous nosebleed during the performance of my first song with my quartet in a public, paid environment after months of working towards this gig and lining it all up. And I wasn't able to come back and complete the gig. But because I work with people who I trust, they took it over for me, and they kept it happening until I was back from the hospital and patched up. And I did another gig later that afternoon on my own in the same facility, which went off without a hitch. I don't think I could have done that in the past. I think I would have been my ego would have been so damaged and so upset by having the rug pulled out for me like this for no apparent reason, that it would have I wouldn't have been able to function. But no, it was fine, which was a very interesting thing to experience, because it was a unique, surreal event to happen. Never had anything like that happen before. It was cool, actually. I think I'll be able to laugh about it now in the future. But it was strange, and very indicative of where I am now. So that was comforting.
I want to ask you a couple open-ended ones. Where are you now?
Where am I now? I'm in a very good place. I'm getting ready to record my own music for the first time in 35 years. I've written a number of things of which I'm quite proud. No idea what will come of them. I just know that when I play them, people like them, and I like them, and for the sake of them being put out in the world, it has to happen. I know that. I am actually quite optimistic about the future prospects and what happens next. I'm not worrying about what happens next. I have made a conscious decision not to worry about things I can't control, which is huge. That's a conscious decision. That's not something... For years, I habitually worried. Will there, where's the next gig coming from?
Yeah.
I don't worry about it anymore. And I don't worry about the things that I am ending. I'm not worried about them being replaced by something better because they have been. That's been really interesting. I truly believe that once a door closes, another one opens. I really believe that now. It's just happened enough over the last few years that I really believe it. I am a fatalist. I really am. In the most positive way. I think things turn out the way they're supposed to. There's a Yiddish word for this. It's called bashert.
Bashert.
And bashert means when things are meant to be, they are bashert. And I think things feel very bashert for me now. I can't tell you why in a logical way. It just feels that way. And I know that what I project into the world is the world that I'm going to create for myself. I know that.
It's based on that gut feeling again.
A gut feeling and knowing that I have accomplished things in the past consistently. They haven't been flukes.
Yeah.
I've had an opportunity to do enough things more than once.
So, from here, where do you want to go?
Where do I want to go? I'm the kind of character who sometimes visualizes what I want to do, and sometimes just goes with the flow and just accepts, like a Buddhist, what comes my way. I know that when I'm clear about what I want, I generally get what I want. I know that when I am not clear about what I want, things will happen anyway, and how I deal with them will determine whether they're successful and whether they do take me somewhere where I want to go. But I'm not worried about terrible things happening anymore. I'm not worried about things being taken away from me because over the last 3 years, technically all of them were. And I did fine. It wasn't easy and it wasn't necessarily fun, but I got through it. And I kept afloat. I kept my family afloat. And I kept my sanity and I kept my creative juices from dissipating. And I'm in a good place now because I believe in myself. That's where I'm at now. I'm at a point where I believe in who I am and what I can be capable of. That's where I'm at.
It sounds like a really good place to be.
I'm very happy where I am right now. And that can change tomorrow, but I could get another nosebleed tomorrow. And I know that since I got one 2 days ago and the world didn't end, I'll deal with it. And I'll do the next gig, and it'll be fine.
It's super important to know that, have that ability to know that everything gonna be good at the end of the day.
I trust that things will turn out the way they're supposed to. It may not necessarily be the ideal scenario that I would hope it to be, but I think everything is an opportunity to learn. Everything is an opportunity to experience possibility.
Yeah.
And everything is you can always do better. You can always tweak if you don't give up. It's all about not giving up.
It's all about not giving up. Because you feel the place where you are right now and how it all perfectly aligns, how your internal voice, the gut, is telling you which direction to go and how it should be projected to the world, let's say. I want to know the flip side of it. What have been your failure story?
There's been numbers of them. There have been disasters. One of the silliest things I ever did was one year on one of my birthdays, I had a gig, and I decided to get a full body massage prior to the gig, which I thought would just be a treat, and I'd be all mellow for the gig, and it would be wonderful. Well, I was so relaxed and so blissed out that I forgot to bring part of my gear to the gig. So I couldn't use my keyboard. And I went on a frantic, after I got there and realized there was no electrical power source for me to plug into the keyboard to make it work. I went on this frantic search for a music store in the neighborhood. There wasn't any that was either open or had what I needed, this particular adapter. So I ended up singing the gig a cappella, which I didn't have any experience doing prior at that time. I could do it now, but I couldn't do it then. And it was a disaster. It was a disaster because I was embarrassed. It was clear that I wasn't having fun and was just doing this out of guilt. And strangely enough, they never invited me back. Strangely enough. But I learned a lot from that. It was a disaster, really. I don't even know if I got paid. It doesn't matter, but I learned a lot. I learned that I've got to stay on top of things. I can't do it all the time. I can't be lackadaisical about stuff because it's going to bite me in the ass. And that's happened. The times in my life when that's happened have been the times when I have not been diligent and I have not been careful about making sure that I've got all my gear, I've got all my music, I leave enough time. Oh, time is a big challenge for me. I am not a chronologically disciplined person. I'm not. And I know that about myself.
Different universe, different time and space.
There are two different kinds of people. One of the theories, there are linear people, like my wife, who is all about chronology and the clock, biological and otherwise. She wanted to have kids. I didn't want to get married. That was a bit of a problem. And there are people who are essential, who are really just concerned about the essence of things. And those are often artists who are always late. They're never early for anything. They're always late because they get absorbed in creating and thinking and mooning about things and chatting. And it's two different operating systems. And I've had to become much more disciplined because as the requirements of my work have become more complicated. So I learned a lot from that. That was a disaster. No one got hurt. Disaster. I don't know. There hasn't been anything terrible. There are things that I've done where I've injured myself. Yeah, I can tell you a silly story. I cut my hand very badly last summer. I was on a gig, and I decided I was going to try to fix a metal clip, a pincher clip to hold your music onto a music stand, like a giant clothespin. And I wrestled with it it had been stepped on and it wasn't closing completely. And I tried to yank it and pull it, and it exploded. And this razor-like blade cut this large chunk out of my middle finger on my left hand, the side of my finger. And there's blood everywhere, and the gig hadn't started yet. That's 2 accidents I've had within a year where there's a lot of blood. Fortunately, I was down the street from Mount Sinai Hospital, and I wrapped it up in a napkin, and I took a glass of water with me, and within a couple of hours, I had 11 stitches, and I left, and I went home. But that was an example of a few things. Impatience. That was an example of believing in scarcity and that I couldn't replace this stupid broken thing, which wasn't all that expensive, wouldn't have been expensive to replace. It was a function of being stubborn. When the universe is resisting you, obviously resisting you, sometimes it just makes sense to just stop. Just wait.
Let it go.
Let it go. And I didn't let it go. And a big part of my life has been happier whenever I let things go that I can't control. I learned a lot from that. And the finger's actually pretty good, considering the nerve damage that could have happened. It was a pretty serious injury. But I worked the next day with a bandage on it. I'm a mad. What can I tell you? But I love my work. I love my work. But I've learned from it. I've learned from all of these so-called disasters. The other nice thing that happened was there was another piano player on the gig, so I went home. I said, they can pay you. And I apologized to the band leader, and I went home. Because that at least made sense.
Yeah, of course.
I couldn't do the gig. So just letting go. Letting go is a huge part of it for me.
On the flip side, I wanna hear what's your definition of success.
Oh, definition of success is being in the flow, knowing that it's going to turn out exactly the way it's supposed to. Ideally, as well as it could, but it's going to go as well as it could. It may or not be the perfect situation, but it's going to be okay. And I'm going to be able to trust the people that I'm working with and the people that are paying me, that it's going to be satisfactory to them. And most importantly, it's going to be enjoyable and therapeutic and emotionally positive for the people who experience whatever it is I'm doing, whether I'm teaching, whether I'm talking, whether I'm singing, whether I'm playing, whether I'm band leading. That for me is success. Reaching the people that I care about. That's success. I'm a communicator. Getting through. People digging who I am. That's success.
On that note, is there anything that you feel that there's misconceptions about what you do and how you do it?
I have to educate people from time to time. It's not always the case that people understand what's involved with what I do, because the whole secret to being a good creative is to make it look like it's not work. There's a Latin expression, nil amarari, which means it basically translates out to don't let them see you sweat. That's what a successful artist does. They don't let you don't show them the 100,000 hours that went into that hour-long gig, that perfect interview. They don't see you buying the equipment, putting the studio together, figuring out what your questions you're going to ask, doing the editing. People don't know, they don't understand. So I have to educate people sometimes on just how much time it takes and how much expertise and how much effort it takes to make things look effortless.
That's right.
And I often have to, not often, but for a while, especially after the shutdown, I had to explain to people why I wasn't prepared to work for what I was prepared to work for before the pandemic. Because now there's a lot more work involved. And now if I do a program for you that's virtual, that's also live, that's twice the work for me. It's not like I just turn on the camera and give you a tape when it's done. That's not how it works. And I do think that there's a danger in today's world that content providers like us are not being valued, because there is a lot of content out there. That's not to say a lot of it's any good, but there's a lot out there. And it's very easy with free music and free podcasts and free everything for people to dismiss what we do as not having the value that it does.
That's so true.
The people who value what we do and get us and realize that we're offering them something extraordinary, those are the people we want to work with. And we don't want to work with the people who don't get. But there are times when we have to assert ourselves and say, folks, this is the story, and if you're not prepared to pay me what I'm worth, I'm out the door, because there are people out there who are.
That's right.
And that's a nice place to be in.
It is definitely a place of peace. And definitely a nice place to be in, where you can decide and choose what you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
That's success.
Beautiful. I want to hear also your definition of a maverick.
Oh, it's interesting. I actually worked on a project several years ago, and one of the albums that we titled for this very independent songwriter that I was working with was Maverick. MAV''RIK. For whatever reason, my friend Donna Greenberg called it Maverick. And she and I really worked well together, because we were creating art for art's sake. We were creating things that we wanted to create that express the things we felt about the world, about things that have happened in the past, about what's important in life, about those things that we love, the people that we love, our feelings about relationships that may not have turned out the way we hoped because we weren't valued, or it just wasn't a good combination. It was a very interesting, very eclectic kind of album, because we really thought of each other, and we were mavericks. We weren't trying to create music for the radio. We weren't trying to create music for anyone but ourselves. And I think a maverick is someone who follows their inner voice and creates because they have to, because it's just part of their nature that they want to express. I think all humans have that innate desire. Whether they believe they're capable of it is something else. But a maverick just does it, and to hell with what happens, right? It's just it's a creative imperative to be who you are, and to not follow someone else's rules, and not feel that you have to live by someone else's paradigms. And you just do what you need to do for yourself. And if people like it, great. And if not, well, at least you expressed it, and you got it. There's a record of you having been true to yourself.
That's true. It's so nice and so different every time I'm asking for that. Those definitions come in such a different such a variety of forms, and every one of them feels great and perfect at the time, and it's ideal for a person that I'm speaking with, and it's just phenomenal how there are so many flavors to Mavericks.
They're like fingerprints. That's by definition, a maverick is someone who is following a unique path. That's the lovely thing about it. It's almost impossible to define it. It's like, how do you define a human being? How do you define the creative urge? How do you define a person's view of the world? Everyone's unique. That's gorgeous.
That's so true.
That's the lovely thing about being human.
It is. It is. I want to ask you, what is your biggest problem right now?
Wow. Biggest problem. It's partly confidence that I can find the time and the money to do these recordings of my original music. I know it's going to happen. It's been deferred a few times because I'm busy working. And the studio that I want to do it at is busy working. And given the choice between spending money and expressing my art and making money and paying my bills and having a comfortable life and paying my mortgage, I know what I would choose because that's the responsible thing. That wasn't how I always operated when I was single, but I have family obligations and people that I love and want to take care of. And if I can, I want to make hay while the sun is shining. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
But again, I don't feel anxiety about that. It's just kind of I feel an urgency, but not an emergency around it. Maybe that's what it is. That's
so beautiful. It sounds like it's not really a problem.
It's a first world problem is what it is, right?
Sure.
When I think about what most of humanity is concerned about right now, and I'm concerned about whether I'm going to get my music recorded within the next year, come on. It's not comparable. It's small potatoes in terms of a problem. So I'm not sugarcoating and telling you my life is perfect, but I'm telling you that I am very content with doing the work now. I watched a very interesting Netflix documentary last night, a three-parter on Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I've always, once he started doing those wonderful, wonderful videos where he was talking to people around the world, he was talking to Ukrainians and explaining to them, he was talking to Russians actually, and his Russian friends, and explaining to them that perhaps you're not being told the truth about what's really going on in Ukraine, and perhaps you might want to maybe distrust. And he started, and then years ago he actually addressed one to Trump while Trump was still president, and basically asked him to be more reasonable and asked him to just do the things that Trump is incapable of. I just started realizing there's more to this guy than, a smarmy governor and, an action violence character and an incredible bodybuilder. There's more to this guy. I knew he wasn't perfect, and by his own admission, he isn't. But he did say so. He did say something that really, really landed for me. He said, given problems, and everyone is going to have problems in their life, you have a choice. And the choice that he made based on his upbringing was not to dwell in feeling victimized when things don't go your way, or feeling that, poor me, this isn't what I deserve. Or he said, just do the work. Don't ask, how am I feeling today? Ask, how can I be useful today? What can I do that'll make the most good for the most people out there? Yeah. You're going to feel happy or sad regardless, so why not be useful? And I thought, yeah, that's not stoic. That's just practical advice. It's not saying it doesn't matter that you feel crappy sometimes, or that you feel great sometimes. It's not saying that's not important. It's just saying do what you need to do every day, because we don't have forever to do it in.
That's so true. That's so true. And because we are kind of touching on the note of eternity, I wanted to ask you.
I'm going to have a pickle while you ask me.
Oh,
that.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to sum it up with two questions. Let's start with, what question would you like to be asked more often?
Generally, by other human beings?
Yep.
Wow, that's a good one. What did you create today?
What did you create today, Jordan?
I reconnected with a friend today prior to coming here. Somebody I've known for a long, long time in a lot of different contexts, worked with in the past, who I've always believed in, but who, for whatever reasons, wasn't necessarily, we haven't necessarily had the opportunities to follow up on the potential of that initial meeting years ago. And I've been back and forth as to whether this person was taking advantage of me, or I was just allowing myself to be taken advantage of, or whether the timing just wasn't right, or whether it just wasn't beschert, for there to be something better or greater that could be created in collaboration with this person. And I went to this lunch with an open mind, and we of course debriefed over the last year or two since we last had lunch together. And I let him tell me what he's been up to, and I let him ask me, would you consider resurrecting this idea we had years ago? I wasn't going to ask. I wasn't going to tell him that I felt there was always more potential to our relationship, and I was wondering if it would ever be realized. I didn't ask him that question. I let him ask me. And I like when people come back to me and say, yeah, I'd like to work with you again. I like that. Because that means it wasn't a fluke. That means there's still something there. There's still juice. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm learning to keep my mouth shut. I mean, that's why we have 2 ears and one mouth, right?
Yeah.
So I'm letting the world come to me, as to me feeling like I have to come to the world and ask the world for things. That's different. That's what I did today. And I'm doing I'm paying more things forward if I can. I'm doing more favors for friends who I think have been good to me and who I love and who I would like to see recognized for the beautiful people they are. That I've been doing as well this week. Well, not just this week, but there were several examples. I mentioned one to you earlier. Just giving friends an opportunity to have a larger audience, and to be mavericks and to be recognized for it. And to be, he'd be a wonderful interview subject, by the way, this friend. I feel I'm successful when my friends are successful.
Yeah.
I'm not jealous of anybody anymore. When I see really good, talented people really rocking it on stage, I'm not jealous anymore. Because I've experienced that, and I feel empathic, and I feel good for them. That's changed. That's changed. And if I can bring more of that to the world, and I can bring more sort of comfort food music to people, and make them feel reconnected to each other and to their pasts and to who they are. There used to be a student that I had at one of the places that I worked. She was a resident. Every time I was there, she would say to me when we were done, she'd say, "Thank you, you gave me my life back." I thought, wow, I thought I was just playing songs. But for her, that was a huge part of her identity. That's what made her remember, with all of her memory issues, who she was and what was important. And that's why I'm still in music, and that's why that's the focus of my life. because nothing else that I've done has ever had the ability to do that for other people. And that's a tremendous gift for me to it's not mine. It's been given to me, and I have to share it with them.
That's a beautiful perspective of this is not yours, and it has been given to you, and also being successful when your friends are successful. It's a perfect state to be in. So to make it, put the bracket to this wonderful conversation, what have been the greatest day of your life?
Birth of my kids. No question. No question. Best gig ever. Best gig ever. Oh, there's nothing like it. It makes everything else small potatoes. I adore my kids. I adore my wife too. But my kids are everything. And the days that they were born were just, to this moment, I remember it clear as day. And to bring another life into the world and to nurture it and to do your best to teach all the things that you want them to know, and to watch them turn into independent human beings who you're proud of because they make good choices, or they make choices that they learn a lot from. And then make good choices as a result of that. Whatever, just bringing people into the world who can be happy and know how to do the work to be happy. Best. That's the best thing I've done as a human being.
Jordan, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for being a guest and had such a wonderful conversationalist.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. And it's a wrap. We dare you. If you are bold enough, hit subscribe, repost the rebellion, and don't miss out on next week's episode. It's going to be bloody brilliant. See you on the next one.